Well, hey, I'm Tom Law here today to talk about sometimes it is rocket surgery, a little bit of my adventures in the last year or so, and some context on what the heck you're supposed to do for controlled information and technologies for small businesses. Um, I don't know. My last name is Law. Sometimes I like to be a little too by the book, maybe. And I think if you do it right, it makes it easier to be awesome. So, uh, agenda, intros from me and the relevant companies, get into what is controlled information, and then some practical considerations. Um, Big thing, I'm not a law firm. Sometimes people are confused. That is just my name. So this is not legal advice. This is not a compliance legal review. This is a very fast 10-minute presentation on some things you might want to consider and some starting points for looking at controlled technologies for small companies. So I guess big stuff. I was at NI till 2023. I resigned after last NI Connect and kind of started my own. Actually, a couple of companies decided to go all in and go, hey, why not do rocketry and robots and start an AI company? All the kooky things I always wanted to do because, 33, time to do that. Yeah. But while I was at NI, I went through ELP. I think a lot of people are familiar with the applications engineering program here. Then I spent about 10 years in RF software R&D, doing VST, USRP, software-defined radio, and eventually wound up actually doing some control technologies work under the long-term innovation program, doing radar technologies and large system emulation. I think I might actually have the distinction of building the last keynote of the last ever NI Connect as NI. If you guys want to go back and check out some of the Aries work from the last NI Connect last day keynote, it was super cool. Large scale radar emulation. Other stuff, two companies I own, Newton Dynamics, which is rockets and robots, OKI, ethical AI. And a lot of the context for this is I've been working with Blue Shift Aerospace as controls and automation lead for about 9 months now under Newton Dynamics. Also, I really, really love pinball, and I actually have built quite a few pinball machines, including helping out with this Weird Al pinball you see here in the corner. So even if you don't want to talk about compliance, then please hit me up if you want to talk about pinball or if you're ever visiting Portland. So where we are in Maine, shout out to Portland and Maine. It is amazing here. I moved from Austin, and I gave a little bit of context here. Maine, the state, is actually smaller than the Austin metro area, people and economy-wise. Also, it is an entire state and awesome. There are some really big heavy hitters there, including some, publicly known National Instruments customers like Texas Instruments, Jackson Labs, Diodes Inc. It is a beautiful place. It is also heavily biased towards supporting, like the little guy, if you will. So there's a ton of opportunities here for startups, incubators, and especially the kind of, I think, bread and butter real world engineering stuff that, kind of grand challenge engineering that, I think NI really excels at, and a lot of you guys build. So also, oh, apologies, scrolled through that too fast. And green and blue economy. So a lot of forest, agriculture, ocean stuff, and rockets. So if you're interested in getting in touch, this is my best contact. LinkedIn also works. So about Newton. So my big dream for Newton is to get into autonomous logistics, robotics, environmental resource management. For now, it's mostly IP development, patents, and doing rocketry. But if you are like, hey, I'm on this call and I would really love to build some sea drones on the weekends, well, there's at least one company you're aware of now that does that. So get in touch. Blue Shift Aerospace is a Maine company based in Brunswick at a naval base. So I guess the big thing to know is it's green launch tech. We do nanosats, so you're not talking about launching like a bus into space. These are 24-inch rockets currently. It's founded in 2016. focused on polar nanosat launches. So this is, again, putting small payloads in orbit, strategic launch, and also polar orbits. So there are only two places in the US that you can actually do polar. So this means around North-South Pole launches in the US. The other one's in Alaska. And Alaska has basically no rail infrastructure that can get anything there. So everything comes in by sea. We're setting up to do the similar in Maine. This is a picture of me with much of the team. We had a visit from NASA Administrator Bill Nelson a few months back, along with the Senator and Governor. It's a medium high profile here in Maine. So it was very exciting. So I guess that's the context for why I care about controlled information. And this is very, very brief. And I'm also going to avoid getting into specific types of controlled information because I don't want anybody to have the wrong information. So the big thing here is do your research and get in touch if you want some more leads to follow up on. I tend to think of information control policies as kind of like a Russian nesting doll. So there's this big thing of like all of the data that a company theoretically controls. If that's stuff that you're releasing, if it's public information on your website, whether it's technical specifications, whatever it might be, if the company controls it, you can call that public company data. Pretty much everybody's familiar with like, oh, there's only like internal data at that point, stuff that we don't release, stuff that we don't give to people without a contract or an NDA in place. But then beyond that, you get into restricted access data. So just about every company also has this, whether it's employee data, any kind of trade secrets, need to know basis. If you have a GitHub repo that is only available to R&D, then you have restricted data. This is pretty much, again, anything where only certain people have need to know access. Controlled information, we get into an additional category of it's not just restricted access, but how it is managed is also controlled. So this means there's rules about copying, how it's stored, if it's encrypted, how it's tagged and labeled, beyond just who has access to it. And then controlled technologies is a specific term that typically implies export control. And there are a whole bucket load of rules that may apply to you for controlled technologies. And again, we don't have enough time to get into this. I think I've only got 5 minutes left as it is. So when you start taking a look at like how you actually need to manage things, your information control policy or comprehensive data governance policy is kind of a common term that's used in a lot of states in the US. It's going to be a roll-up of not just what the government says you need to do. So there's the federal government, local jurisdictions, cross-border stuff, or cross-state, interstate rules sometimes, as well as your client policies. So if you're working, as I do, with a client, like I'm providing services for Blue Shift, you need to adhere to all of their policies for all the work, that product that you do, your own organizational policies, and then also insurance, because they really like it, or I would say they really hate it if you don't do things right. And especially when you're getting into this kind of, at least the kind of work that I'm currently doing, insurance is it's key. So when we get into what we need to do with controlled information, the first step is always classification. It's like, what do we need to control? This is where you decide like, hey, I just generated a new piece of information, or I received a new piece of information from a client. Evaluate, is it tagged, right? Have they said that it's restricted access? Don't give this to somebody. You'll see this on people's emails like, hey, this is for the intended recipient only. Is it potentially sensitive information? Whether that's about an individual, whether it's about a company, is it IP? Once you've identified what category it's in, which again, this is up to your own organizational protocols, but like then you may have additional restrictions on things like storage, transport, how you handle it, and how long it lives. This, I think people actually underestimate, not just in government work and other like highly controlled environments, but like nowadays everything is really controlled information. So like when you start looking at things like the new Massachusetts data privacy laws, when you look at the New York Shield Act, if you even have things like your user data, customer data, stuff online, or employee data, the restriction, like it's still pretty stiff standards. Um, but when it gets into potentially like the controlled technology stuff, like government rules, especially federal government rules, I'm not going to get into telling you exactly anything I recommend you do here because, again, it's way out of scope for a 10-minute conversation. But you're going to have to look at physical storage, means of access, encryption, um, all kinds of stuff. And again, it depends what you're handling and what the scope of that is. So, again, your organization needs to identify and clearly define what kind of controlled information you handle and what you need to do with it. This is usually like, hey, review what kind of stuff we accept, how do we manage it, and especially then, how do we get rid of it? Because you don't want to just have a big pile of data stacking up forever. So when a job is done, let it be done. Um, this, especially because I know this is an international audience, like I'm not going to be prescriptive with what a controlled technology may be, but don't be ignorant. Educate yourself if you think you're doing anything that this may apply to, and understand what regulations apply to the activities you're doing. For a small business, I think if you guys haven't caught on the last bit, I think I tend to take a very conservative approach, but I also think that defining the healthy boundaries and doing things right is the right way to do it. It just makes things easier in the long run. A thing that I think a lot of people aren't aware of and really will come up quickly if you start managing like especially export control information. Most digital services, email, Zoom, even the software we're on right now, is not going to be compliant with export control. So when you are evaluating what you can use, what tools you're using, even things like 3D modeling software, you need to make sure that if they are like a cloud service, that those cloud services are hosted in the country where that information needs to reside. And there are actually like relatively few um, 3D modeling and simulation providers that still allow you to do like local hosting and run your own models. But um, those are the kinds of things you need to be aware of. It's basically like you can't just say, hey, I'm going to use whatever service XYZ off the internet, and that it's going to be fine managing potentially controlled information. um, just about any organization that's larger. Yeah. Tim in chat said, consult your ITAR officer if you have a company large enough to have one. So I think that is a good thing to do. And that ITAR officer potentially, or whoever the responsible individual is going to be, would be under your data governance policy. Even for an organization that is only like a handful of people, having some kind of codified data governance policy or information security program is a really good idea, because even if you're the only person handling it, or there's a couple of people and you can say, hey, this is how we do it informally. As soon as you bring on a subcontractor or anybody else that's a service provider, or you have clients that require any kind of specific data management, um, you want to have it written down and on hand. So this is like, you can't assume that when a subcontractor takes on work or information for you, that they are just going to like take care of it. You need to make sure that they comply to your documented policies. And especially now with a lot of states rolling out their own information management laws, there are a lot of, like, Massachusetts is a local region for us trying to do business in Boston area. Um, you have to have a documented data governance and information security program, like just to even do business in the state these days. This is not something you really want to play catch up on, because especially with us as a small business, you don't have like a lot of cushion to absorb any fines or penalties. So just like, it's a lot, and don't mess around with it would be my recommendation. Um, so again, just thinking about how you're managing data is critical across not just government and controlled technology work, but really just like thinking about how you manage data in general. If you did have a breach, what the heck would happen to your customer lists? You don't want to mess with that either. And yes, I did have to procure rocketry insurance for a small business, which is not actually a super easy thing to do. Um, there's like 10 levels or of things that insurance companies don't like you to do, and like controlling rockets is like level 11. So also to be clear, I test rockets, I test and measure rockets. I don't guide or control any rockets. That is left up to the flight computers and safety systems approved by the FAA. So I just test them. But insurance providers can actually be a really great resource because they do have things like checklists and other resources available, including like compliance contractors often that can basically say like, hey, if you are going to do this, we can give you some reasonable risk estimate and also give guidance on what you should do. Um, at least that has been what I have found. And when you change what you're doing, make sure that you are keeping up with the risk profile for what you are doing now. So I think I just gave the example is like Newton would never take on that additional steps of like actually controlling rockets. Bad idea under our current insurance and liability profile. So reevaluate and also make sure that those things are really spelled out when you are a service provider in any contracts because you don't want it to bleed over. So um, that is about what I've got. I am very passionate about many things. I would love to talk with people. So please do reach out. This GLA at newton.mosmail.com will get me or LinkedIn as well. I think we have like a hot second for questions if anybody wants to put anything in chat. So there's a question in chat about CUI handling. So this is controlled unclassified information. Uh, this is again the kind of thing that I think is beyond the scope of a 10-minute small business chat. But I have many thoughts on controlled unclassified information. Typically, that is going to be what I tried to highlight back here, where it is not necessarily a controlled technology or classified information, which I didn't get into on this slide, but it's going to, again, be under the scope of controlled information and is going to be in this Russian nesting doll about right here. But typically, controlled unclassified information is going to be those things that are mandated by a contract or things that are mandated by your internal policies as controlled information. Awesome. Well, thank you for attending the presentation, and I hope to bump digital elbows with many of you in chat over the next day or so. Have a great summit.